We want our children to become more independent. And part of that has to do with, even when they're young, learning how to dress themselves and feed themselves and toileting. All those things are great. But part of independence as they get older is learning how to solve their own problems. Now, children who don't solve their own problems rely on complaining and whining. And that's how they even bring problems to their parents and expect the parents to solve problems for their children. And then parents do, to relieve the complaining and the whining. It's just parents believe that that's their job description, is to solve problems for children. And I think to a certain extent it is. But one of the things we want to do is teach our children how to solve problems for themselves. What is that going to look like? See, I think that we can foster independence in our children when they bring a problem to us by asking open-ended questions and say, oh, wow, that's a problem. I wonder what you're going to do about that. Or would you like some ideas of how other people solve those problems? I've lost my shoe. Okay, well, would you like some ideas of how others might solve that problem? Maybe what you ought to do is think about where you found the first shoe, because if they found the first shoe, maybe the second one isn't far behind, or maybe you need to sit down and think about where the last time you played with that toy was, and maybe you'll remember where it is. We're empowering children. Instead of going and finding their things, we're helping them to solve their own problems. I like the story of the one mom who said, I was working on this with my kids because they tend to complain and whine. And my son came to the table and he says, I don't have a fork. Now, my typical response, mom said, was to get up and get him a fork. But I didn't. I said, oh, that's a problem. And so my son got up and he went over to the drawer and he saw there no more clean forks in the drawer. That's probably why there wasn't a clean fork on the table. And so, Mom, there's no more clean forks. And Mom says, oh. And the boy's kind of catching on now. So he took a spoon out. Now, there's a number of things he could have done. He could have taken a fork out of the dishwasher and washed it, or he could have, in this case, what he did is he took a spoon, he brought it back. And sometimes children will solve problems in different ways than we would expect. And we say, okay, fine. You want to eat with a spoon? That's great. That's a way to solve the problem. And so in this way, Mom was trying to develop independence in her son. It's one of the ways we help children move away from problems to solutions, because complaining focuses on the problems. You know, we often tell our children, and we use that verse in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's a great verse in God's word. But do you know the context of that verse? It comes right after another verse. Let me read it to you. This is Philippians 4:12 and 13. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. We usually use that term in that verse 13 in terms of problem solving, that I can solve any problem that God gives me. But really, it has this idea of learning contentment in our lives. What an interesting idea. Is sometimes children come and complain, or they're bored or whatever, and instead of being the cruise directors for our children, instead of solving the problems for them, sometimes what we want to do is turn the problem back over to them, or we need to say, you know, maybe you just need to be satisfied with what you have instead of always wanting more. This is part of helping our children grow up. It's part of the independence training that we're continually helping our children accomplish. Now, we can't just walk away and leave them alone, because many children, especially as they get into the early teen years, try to solve problems in ways that aren't appropriate or in ways that are insufficient, get the minimum done and walk away. And so many times we have to be more engaged in their lives. So I'm not saying walk away, but we are in the process of helping children, even with more parental control sometimes, learn how to solve problems for themselves.